I'm going to run this chat, which I created in Node. So if I say node chat.mjs, it will start a simple interface in CLI that just sends requests to OpenAI, just talking with an LLM. So the message I'm going to send is, "Hi, my name is Taha." So we expect that it will just respond with something like, "Hi Taha, nice to meet you. How can I help you today?" Now what I'm going to send next is, "What's my name?" So we expect that it will know it, but let's see what we will get. So it says, "I don't know your name unless you tell me," which is a little bit weird because we just told it that my name in the previous message. So in this video, I'm going to answer why this happened and how we can fix this. And I'm also going to show you how we can build this chat from scratch. So let's go to the code editor. So I'm here in the code editor, and let me show you how we can create this chat in Node, which is a simple one that we can use readline, which is a built-in module that we have in Node. So all you have to do is just create an interface using this method, and we give it that the input and the output are the standard in and standard out. And then in this while loop, which is an infinite one, every time we just call this question, because it will give us a prompt where you can insert any message you want, and then it will return it here. And then I'm going to check if it's exit, then that means we can just end the chat. Otherwise, it will just respond with something, for example, "you said," and it will just echo out whatever we sent above. And then after you break out of this loop, it will just close the interface. So let me save this and run that to show you what we will get. So let's run that again. Let's say "hi," and it will just respond with "hi." So nothing special here. Let's exit out. And now I'm going to update the code so we can talk with OpenAI, or you can use any LLM provider you want. But the idea is now, instead of just echoing out the message here, we want to send a request to the LLM and then just print out the response here. So let's start by importing OpenAI. So I installed that using npm, and now I'm going to create a client. So let me just put the code here quickly. And you can see it just connects with the API endpoint here in this URL. And then I'm going to use the API key from the environment variable. So I have to load this. I already have that created, but I want to load it here. Now, the next thing we want to do is now, instead of echoing out the message, we want to send a request to OpenAI. But before that, I wanted just to mention that here I'm using OpenAI just as an example, but you can use any LLM provider you want, whether it's Anthropic or something like an open source. If you want to follow along, make sure that you are using the OpenAI API, which almost all frontier models support. But if you want to use their own SDK and APIs, you can do that, but you have to check what are the differences in terms of the format, but the concept will be the same. So again, let me go here and I'm going to send the message to OpenAI, which I'm going to say response, and let's say client chat completion. I'm going to use the completions API and create. And then I'm going to use a model. Let's use a cheap one. Let's use 5.4 mini. And then let's send the messages. So the message would be, the format we will use is role user. And then the content is the message we just got from the CLI interface. So you can see this one. And then that will return a response, and we will just get the message from it. Let's say LLM message, and let's say response, choice, the first one, and message, and then content. And then instead of just echoing out stuff, I'm going to show the message here. And let's say this is the LLM that responded. Now let's go to the terminal and run that. So I'm going to say node chat. Let's say, "Hi, my name is Taha." Let's wait. And it works. Now again, if I ask it, "What's my name?" it will not know. So now we are back into the initial state that I showed you at the beginning of this video. Now, before we see how to fix it, we need to understand an important concept about LLMs, which is that LLMs are stateless. So let me first show you what that means, and then we're going to fix it. So you can see here, we have a simple diagram that shows us we have an LLM that we communicate with. The idea of an LLM is that you send it an input tokens, which is the text you send, and it will just give you out the output. So an LLM stateless means that you can think of it as a pure function, where the output completely depends on what the input is. So it does not know anything other than the input. So to show you what I mean, if I send this message, so let's say I said, this is a format we are using for OpenAI, the role is user, which means that the user is sending the message, and then the content is, hi, my name is Taha. So it will just respond with some message. Or actually, the format would be something like this. So you can see that the message is in the content, but also you can look at the role and it says assistant. So this is the way that an LLM can distinguish between a message that the user sent and the message that it sent. So it's the output. An LLM responded with something and it can tell if it's from it or from the user based on the role. So that's a simple thing to see. Now, let's say that I want to send another message, which is, what's my name? And you can see in the array of messages, I'm just sending this message. Now, you can see, as we've seen in the example, that it will say, I don't know. So in this case, it has no memory, it has no context of where that name should be coming from. It's just based on the input tokens, it will give you the output tokens, and in this case, it doesn't know the name. In order to fix this, we have to give it the full history. So instead of me sending just only the last message, which is, what's my name? I want to send the full history. In this case, it will be the first message, which is role user, hi, my name is Taha. Then the second one is the assistant one, which is the response that it gave us when we sent the first message. And you can see we are putting the whole thing here. And then the last object here is the message that we want to send so we get a response from. So if I send this, then you will see that it will know that my name is Taha because it looks at the full conversation here, that the assistant here, it tells us, hi Taha, how can I help you? Because it already knows this. And it knows this because of the previous message, which is when I told it, what's my name? And in this case, it always have to just predict what's the next token, like what's the next response it's going to give us. And every single time we send it an input, every single time we send it a request, it will give us a response based on the full history, on the full array of objects that we have here, where we give it everything and then the last thing we want to get a response for. That's the basic idea. So that means if we want to fix the example I showed you at the beginning of this video, all we have to do is, instead of just sending only the last message, we want to send the full history, like all the messages. So it should be an easy way to fix it. Let's go to the code editor and try that. So if you take a look at the example, in the messages array, we are just sending the message that we get from the prompt here. But now we want to send this, but also the history, all the previous messages, which means we want to keep track of all the messages every single time we send something. And the simplest way to do this is just to create messages array, and let's start with an empty one. And that means every single time we send a message, we need to just store it here as a history. So you can see here we are getting the message from the prompt that we get in the CLI, and then I'm going to say messages, push, and the new message. But do you think that would work? Actually, that wouldn't work because remember, the format here is that it needs this kind of object. So instead of just sending the message, we want to send the role, the user, and the content is the message. So let's just get this and move it here. And then that means every single time we want to send the full history, and the full history plus the message, the last one, will be in the messages array. So we were going to just say messages or just this. But now you might ask, this doesn't include the messages that we get from the LLM. And that's right. But we can also add it simply by, after we get the response here, just say messages and push. And then we can get that from the response. Choices, the first one. And you can say message. And it will include the full object, which is going to be role assistant, content message. Or if you want to be more explicit, you can just say content, which will give you just only the content of the message. And then you can wrap it with an object. Role is assistant. And the content is this. You can do this, or you can just send this message because it's going to have the same thing. So that will make everything work. But actually, before we test this, let's make things a little bit tidier. So all I'm going to do is just move this line below, and I'm going to say this is the LLM message, where we can just use the same thing here and use it here, and that will make it better. So let's save and try. Let's say this. Hi, my name is Taha. What's my name? And you can see it tells us that your name is Taha. Everything works because we give it the full history every single time we communicate with the LLM. And actually, let me add something that will help us visualize things better, which is if you go here, when we exit, I'm going to just say console.dir, which is just a way to console log or output something. And in this case, I'm going to output the full messages array. So at this time, when we exit, it will show us the full history of messages. So let's go back here and let's run that again and say, hi, my name is Taha. What's my name? And if we exit, now you can see that we are printing the full history. The first one is the user message that I sent. Then this is the message that the LLM responded with. And then the message I sent. And then the assistant, which gave us the my name. So now you know, when you hear that LLMs are stateless, it just means that the output tokens completely depends on the input tokens. It's just as a pure function. So everything depends on whatever you send it. So you send it the full history, it has more context, so it can give you better answers. I hope you found this useful. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching.